Let the stories carry you into sleep. My name is Miss Lian Quiet, and in my family, success had one name, Orion Capital. My father, Mr. Quiet, was vice president of the firm. My brother Nathan was his heir apparent. And me, I was the one who threw it all away for combat boots and digital battlefields. You had potential, my father used to say, but you chose this. He meant the uniform, the oath, the missions no one ever asked about. At every family gathering, I sat quietly as they toasted each other's promotions, IPOs and vacation homes. No one raised a glass for the classified operations I led. No one saw the 4-star commendation buried in my closet. To them, I was a dropout in disguise, a walking disappointment. But what they didn't know was this: I wasn't just in the military. I was about to take control of their entire world, and they had no idea. Funny how the people who belittle your choices never stop inviting you to dinner, just so they can remind you where you don't belong. That night, the long mahogany table at my parents' estate gleamed under soft lighting. Crystal glasses clinked as my father raised his wine to Nathan. "Junior VP at 30, he beamed. "That's the Quiet legacy." I smiled faintly, swirling untouched red wine, while their laughter echoed like a boardroom chant. I'd briefed Federal Intelligence just 2 days earlier. Now I was being asked if I was still playing soldier. My Aunt Linda leaned over, voice syrupy sweet. "So, Lian, do they let women lead now, or are you still filing papers?" Even Nathan joined in. "Hey sis, Orion's hiring. I could get you something entry level." The entire table chuckled. They didn't know tomorrow I'd be the one deciding whether Orion Capital even survives. Nathan's joke still hung in the air, sour and smug. I could have said it then, told them I command over 300 cyber warfare specialists at the Federal Cyber Command, that my name sits on top-secret memos delivered to the White House, that just last week I briefed the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but instead I said nothing, because the truth, they weren't worth the clearance. "Lian's doing something with computers," my mother chirped, trying to soften the embarrassment. "Admin work, right?" I nodded politely, hiding the sting in my throat. My job wasn't to correct their ignorance, it was to protect a country they barely understood. Uncle Richard snorted. "With your education, you could have made real money by now." Across the table, Nathan raised his glass again. "Still time, sis. I could help you find something more suitable." Too bad Orion Capital's fate now rested in my unsuitable hands. Nathan leaned back in his chair, smug as ever. "I could probably get you in," he said, swirling his wine like a Bond villain who just closed a deal. "We've got a few openings for entry-level project analysts. Something easy, something manageable." The table erupted in polite laughter. I stared at my glass, my jaw clenched. Last week I coordinated a tri-branch cyber counter-strike against an active threat cell. But sure, data entry sounded lovely. He wasn't offering help. He was offering humiliation, wrapped in fake concern and polished silverware. Behind my smile was a fire they'd never seen. Because tomorrow morning, I'd be the one deciding whether his department would even exist by quarter's end. "Just think about it," he grinned. I met his eyes with a calm, so quiet it felt dangerous. I already had something planned for his department, and it didn't involve a promotion. They mocked my career while their entire company was gasping for air and didn't even know it. Orion Capital, the empire my father worshipped, had been clawing for a federal cybersecurity contract for months. Desperate meetings, back-channel proposals, scrambling to update their infrastructure. The contract? It sat on my desk, unreviewed, unapproved, unacknowledged. They had no idea I was the colonel overseeing the unit responsible for reviewing their systems, no idea that I'd already flagged Orion as a potential national risk, no idea that the final decision wasn't in my father's hands, it was in mine. I glanced around the dinner table, watching them toast to their illusion of control. And I couldn't help but wonder, when that boardroom door opened tomorrow, when they saw me in uniform, would they finally realize I wasn't their disappointment? Or would they still not see the storm coming with my signature on it? Just when I thought the evening had wrung out its last insult, Aunt Linda leaned in with that look only meddling relatives perfect. "You know, Lian," she cooed, "my friend's son James just started a tech company, handsome, well-off, and, thankfully, still single." My mother jumped in. "Maybe it's time to settle down, sweetheart. Find a man who can take care of you." James. They meant Major General Whitmore, my direct superior, the same man who'd just finalized Orion Capital's security briefing and recently divorced his husband. Their clueless matchmaking would have been funny if it wasn't so painfully revealing. To them, I wasn't a leader. I was a woman with too much independence and no ring on her finger. I raised my glass and smiled. "I'm focused on my career right now." They nodded approvingly, thinking I'd seen the light. Tomorrow they'd discover just how brightly I already burned. I left the dinner table early, the taste of burnt silence still on my tongue. Back in my car, I unlocked my encrypted device and called the one man in Washington who knew the truth about me. "Colonel Quiet," said Major General Whitmore, crisp and calm. "We go for Bud 900. Boardroom briefing is confirmed. Orion has no clue what's coming." My voice was steady. "Everything's ready. I want this done by the book." "Of course, ma'am, though I still think you should have told them tonight." Told them? That I outrank half the Pentagon's civilian liaisons? That the fallback career they mocked had positioned me as the firewall between Orion and federal exposure? No, they'd find out in the only language they respected: power, titles, and control. I watched the lights of the estate grow smaller in my mirror, and smiled, knowing tomorrow their illusions would burn in broad daylight. Back at my apartment, not the modest military housing they imagined, but a glass-walled penthouse towering over the city, I opened the encrypted dossier. Orion Capital's security systems were worse than we thought. Outdated firewalls, dormant threat detection, unpatched code vulnerable to nation-state attacks. They didn't need help. They needed salvation. And ironically, I was the one holding the rope, or the scissors. A ping lit up my screen. Nathan again. "Think about that analyst job, sis. Better than wasting your life pretending to matter." I didn't respond, just dragged his message into my irrelevant folder and opened a classified breach report, one that named Orion as an active national security risk. While they dined on ego and vintage wine, I was preparing a battlefield. And tomorrow, I wouldn't need to raise my voice because my silence would detonate everything. At dawn, I stood in front of my closet, not for clothes, but for armor. Behind a row of casual blazers hung the uniform they never imagined I wore. Colonel Lian Quiet, Commanding Officer, Federal Cyber Command. Bronze clusters, silver stripes, a wall of silent proof. I slid the medals into place, each one earned, during the years my family said I was figuring things out. By 7:30 I was at Orion Capital's headquarters. The receptionist scanned my ID. Her eyes widened. "Colonel Quiet? Are you related to Mr. Quiet?" "Yes," I said, adjusting my lapel. "He's my father." She stood immediately. "Major General Whitmore is waiting for you in the executive suite." As I rode the private elevator up, I remembered every smirk, every condescending word, every invitation to play small. And I smiled because they were all about to see who they'd been underestimating for a decade. The executive boardroom looked the same as I remembered: sleek, sterile, untouchable. As a child, I'd watched my father rule this space like a king. Today, he didn't even notice me standing behind the display screen. Major General Whitmore stepped forward. Gentlemen, this meeting will be led by Colonel Lien Quiet. I stepped into the light. The silence hit like a detonation. My father's face paled. Nathan looked like someone had yanked the ground out from under him. "Good morning," I said evenly. "I'm here to brief you on serious vulnerabilities in Orion Capital's cybersecurity systems." My voice didn't waver. Their legacy had been built on excluding me. Now I was the only thing standing between their company and complete federal decertification. My father stammered, "Lien, what is this?" I tapped the screen, one breach after another, each more damning than the last. And then I told them what non-compliance would cost. I laid out the full scope: foreign breach attempts, internal system decay, risk level, critical. The board looked stunned. Nathan stared at my ribbons like they were written in a language he'd never learned. My father's jaw clenched, his world visibly unraveling. "Colonel Quaid," one executive asked, voice tight, "what are our options?" I turned toward him, calm. "Full compliance, immediate overhaul, continuous audits, and we control the protocols." My father tried to regain ground. "Now hold on. Lien, this is outrageous." Major General Whitmore cut in firm. "That's Colonel Quiet, and she has full clearance to enforce these terms. If they refused, the government would blacklist Orion Capital from every federal contract. Their empire would collapse before the next quarter." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to, because the look on my father's face told me he'd finally realized he no longer ran the room. The vote was swift. Within a week, Orion Capital signed the largest federal cybersecurity contract in its history, under full oversight of my division. My father wasn't at the final signing. The board suggested he take early retirement. Behind closed doors, they blamed him for letting things fall through the cracks. Nathan's department was flagged for immediate audit. I didn't attend the ceremony. I was in D.C. briefing the Senate Intelligence Committee. Later that evening, my father emailed me, not demanding, not proud, just broken. "I was wrong. You've become something I never imagined," I replied with 2 sentences. "I didn't become something, I always was. You just didn't want to see it." No rage, no vindication, just a truth he couldn't unhear. And by the time he realized what he'd lost, the entire legacy he built had already been rewritten, without him. 2 months later, I was promoted, the youngest brigadier general in Federal Cyber Command history. The ceremony was televised, senators, diplomats, military brass, all in attendance. My family sat in the back row, small and silent. My mother cried. My father didn't speak. Nathan tried to salute, got it completely wrong. Later, a young lieutenant approached me, eyes full of questions. "General Quiet, your speech about walking your path despite doubt, it hit home. My family thinks I'm wasting my life too." I nodded, remembering that girl at 18 in uniform, flanked by relatives who wouldn't meet her eyes. "Let me tell you a story," I said. "It starts at a family dinner, where they told me I'd never be anything." Around us, the reception carried on, elegant, distant. Through the glass, I saw them, my family, huddled at their table, out of place in a world I now command. And they never understood. Thanks for listening. If this story helped you unwind, don't forget to like and subscribe channel Reddit Stories to Fall Asleep too. There's a new tale waiting for you every night, right here. Sleep well.